Okay, for lecture number 3, I/O buffer modeling, what we're going to talk about is the 3 major types of I/O models for signal integrity modeling and simulation. So it's going to be SPICE models, ibis models, and macro models. And by the end of the lecture series, what I'll give to you is a selection criteria that you can use. So this way you can understand when to use which model for which situation. So it'll be a little bit of a matrix style thing. You can start, at the top and go all the way down to the bottom. And this way you'll have a nice little chart that you can reference when you're trying to decide, should I use an ibis model or a SPICE model or a macro model. And we'll sort of compare and contrast the difference between the I/O models. And this will be sort of the fundamental beginning of your understanding of how I/O models are going to be used in simulation for signal integrity.
Welcome to lecture number 3 in the Certified Signal Integrity Engineer coursework. Lecture number 3 is Input-Output I/O Buffer Modeling Overview. I'm Tim Coyle, President of Signal Consulting Group, and I'm going to be your presenter and host for this lecture. So I'm going to give you a couple of references for this lecture about I/O buffer modeling overview. And I'm really going to give you just one for this one actually, and this is going to be the Handbook of Digital Techniques for High-Speed Design. And this is by Tom Granberg from Prentice Hall in 2004. And this is actually a really good book, and it's a book that I recommend, and that it covers a lot of high-speed digital design technologies, but it's really got a lot of information about the different I/O technologies that are in high-speed designs. And Tom does a really good job of pulling in information on a whole bunch of different topics and I/O things, like there's CML for current mode logic, there's LVDS for low voltage differential signaling. He goes over a wide variety of DDR interfaces. DDR, even it does GDDR, I believe. And then, your standard LV, TTL, and things like that. So it's actually a pretty good book, and it's probably one you want to add to your library. So let's move on to the lecture topics of what we're going to talk about in today's lecture. So we're going to identify 3 different types of models for I/O buffers. And when I talk about I/O buffers, I'm really talking about the device silicon. So this is really going to be your driver or receiver, anything in your interface channel that's an active device. So then we're going to compare and contrast the different model types. And the whole idea is really to gain an understanding of when to use which model type for signal integrity analysis. And so let me draw you a quick example here, right? So if this is your driver, and then you've got a transmission line, and it comes over here to your receiver, right? So like I said, this is your TX, and this is your RX, and let's say this is 50 ohms, right? When you run simulation analysis in any EDA or SPICE tool, what are you going to use for your transmitter and receiver? What type of simulation model, right? And so a lot of people are familiar with SPICE, and of course ibis is very popular for signal integrity, but there's also some other choices, and everything else I lump in the category of which I call a macro model. And we're going to go over that in the rest of this lecture about these 3 major types. So the I/O model building blocks. As I said, there's really 3 types of models available. And the first one is SPICE. And then there's ibis, and then there's macro model. And this is actually the order of normally how you'll find models go is there's a SPICE model, and then there's an ibis model, and then there might be a macro model.